Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome on in to another Unauthorized Caucus. It's Thursday. It's noon. It's caucus time. Mason's not here to say that. I know he wishes he were, but he's not. It's okay. He'll be back soon. He's still out on leave. Or what do we say? What's the business term? He's out on assignment.
On assignment.
He's out on assignment. Yeah, out on assignment. But he'll be back very soon. He and his wife and their little baby, they were doing some medical stuff, and he'll be back in next week. So in the meantime, Mr. Andrew Muller is joining me again. I'm glad to have him here with me. And we got a lot of things we want to talk about today. So don't forget, first of all, before we get into the conversation, go to unauthorizedcaucus.com. That's where you're going to pick up all of the goodies after each episode. Live streams on a Thursday. You'll get the podcast on a Friday, plus all the show notes and our resources that we used. And today there's going to be a lot of them. And I guarantee you're going to have way more hours invested in research after these few minutes we spend together than you're going to have time invested in this episode. There's a lot to cover. So we'll be doing that. But also head over to TREXinc.com. TREXinc.com is where you can find our lovely sponsor. Great people over there, and use Caucus30 as your promo code. You get a big discount, and you'll let them know that you came from us. So thank them for sponsoring this program. We couldn't do it without them, and we appreciate them so much. So, Andrew, where do we start? Fake news or cloud seeding? What in the world? I put all of the goodies in the title today. So if this video doesn't pick up all the fun stuff, I don't know what will.
Yeah, so I guess we can start with the whole cloud seeding thing. And then let me preference, geoengineering. Let me preference all of this with what I'm about to say, which is this is uncharted territory as far as our discussion is going to go. What do I mean by that? I mean that we don't know the ins and outs of geoengineering and cloud seeding. What we want to talk about is you really have what I call kind of in this particular instance, the Holy Trinity, which is the military-industrial complex, the intelligence agencies, and the United Nations. And the three of these entities are all saying the same thing. We can manipulate the weather. We're discussing how we can manipulate the weather and what the benefits and downfalls of that will be. And then they're publishing materials talking about the moral benefits or the moral problems of cloud seeding and geoengineering. So, like Hurricane Milton and Hurricane Helene. I live in Florida. I luckily was able to miss both of those hurricanes, but I know a lot of people who were hit by them, been following the coverage heavily, and I'm very aware of what's going on. Do I believe that, there's some headquarters somewhere where a guy with joysticks controlling the hurricanes? I can't say yes and I can't say no. I really don't know. That sounds very, science fiction, far-fetched. But if you would have talked to me about this whole concept 3 months ago, I would have said I didn't believe it. But I've been doing some research, I've been doing some digging, and what I've learned about these deep staters, when you look at sustainable development goals with the UN, when you look at the Council on Foreign Relations with the CFR, when you look at the WHO and their pandemic plans that they're making, planning things that sounded very COVID-esque in 2019, when you look at the World Economic Forum and they're talking about 15-minute cities and you'll own nothing, you'll be happy, they publish things and let you know of what they're doing, so it's out there in the open. But when they say they're doing something, you need to believe them. And then you also need to do this. Whatever they're saying, they're probably 5 steps ahead of what they've published. So if they say in the early 2000s, or if they say 5 years ago, hey, we're kind of looking into this, and they publish some report, it's very reasonable to say they're 5 or maybe even 10 steps ahead of what they're publishing and letting out. So we have a series of documents and videos here just talking about geoengineering, which is really the manipulation of the atmosphere, the manipulation of weather to accomplish some sort of an end. And we'll get into climate change and some things like that. So we don't know what the severity of this is. We don't know who's behind it. We don't know what their abilities are. But it's a discussion, particularly in light of Hurricane Milton and Hurricane Helene, to talk about, because we look at COVID and the WHO and the UN and the deep state, which is, for those who maybe aren't super familiar with all this stuff I'm saying, this is the shadow government behind the scenes. This is the bureaucracy, the institutions, the NGOs that are the policy manipulators, the policy drivers behind administrations, behind politicians. And when you see them publishing things and saying things, it's no longer a conspiracy theory. Now, where you land on the severity of that or the conclusions you reach as a result of those publishings, we can debate that. But geoengineering, cloud seeding, controlling the weather, controlling the atmosphere, when you have the director of the CIA, John Brennan, we'll play the clip, when you have the UN, when you have the Air Force looking at research studies, talking about these very things, using the phrases that I've been using, it's no longer a conspiracy theory. It's an actual fact. So the American people need to recognize that during COVID, the deep state was willing to wage a bioweapon tool against the American people. During past military activities, they were willing to weaponize war against the American people for power. They don't let crises go to waste. There's nothing they won't do to control the people. So just kind of prefacing this whole conversation, Brian and I aren't making any sort of, bold claim that there's some CIA agent.
Let's hold on. Let's be clear. Neither one of us gets to say Ryan and I or Andrew and I. We each speak for ourselves in this conversation. So let's just, there you go.
I understand that. But I think we are both getting to the conclusion that we don't know the full situation here. We're just looking at the documents, we're looking at the clips, and we're saying we don't know exactly what this means in particular, but it's something they're talking about, and therefore it's something we need to talk about. So if you want to get into some of the documents and start this conversation, we certainly can do so. And you can kind of show a couple of them up. You want me to get into some of the documents, or is there something that you want to get into first?
Sure. And I'll pull it. I mean, I've got these, I'll pull them up. And by the way, if anyone, I've got a couple people texting me that we have an echo going on Andrew's mic. I'm wondering, Andrew, we worked on this, folks, before we went live. I'm wondering if it might be an issue on your end, because I can't seem to get it cleared up. It's fine, whatever it is. We'll work our way through it. But we've got just my only overarching thing I'd say, in addition to Andrew, is likewise, this is one of those situations where there is such a strong push against, when you say any of these key terms, the left or the establishment media will just come out and, oh, you're nuts, you're crazy. What we need to do is figure out how to make this a credible conversation, because that's the thing. Is there a leftist somewhere in Washington, D.C. with a joystick steering hurricanes toward red states? No, I think that's pretty far-fetched. But maybe, I don't know, because the reality is we know that these things exist. They've admitted them. They've said them by name. Shooting sulfates into the atmosphere, aerosol, cloud seeding, all the things, geoengineering. These are not terms that we've made up. These are terms that the other side uses. So this is a big conversation to become very well versed on, and really kind of, I'm going to go ahead and say, like, become the Robert F. Kennedy Jr. of this issue, because if you're going to dive into some of the stuff that has been just relegated to the loony bin of history, then you better be prepared with facts and come ready to make yourself sound more credible, rather than just, it's laser beams in the sky and they're trying to kill the red state votes. It may actually end up being true, but there's certainly a way to not get yourself lumped in with the Alex Jones InfoWars crowd, even though we're all putting pennies in the bank of, yeah, Alex Jones was right yet again. At least that's what 2024 feels like it's been. So I'll just, preface it the same way. That's going on. And the question is, what exactly is going on? Let's speak to what's factual instead of going into the far-fetched. So it's a big topic, and we're opening it today, but by no means are we closing it and giving you solutions. We're just saying this is a for real thing that we need to all discuss, the factual, things that are based in evidence. There's plenty of it that we don't even need to go into the conspiracy land of what we don't know. There's plenty to talk about that we do. So Andrew, you've brought some documents, and I want to try to get these up here, but this will be a little interesting, but I can bring this up. We have lots of things that we poured through. Let me give you all one hint, and then Andrew, I want you to take it away with a couple things, and I'll try to pull them up here. There's a key distinction. You want to talk about the phrases that you and I know: cloud seeding, geoengineering, different things. If you want to see the side where the left really does talk about it and admit that all of this stuff is really happening, or they're really pursuing it, you need to start looking for the phrase climate intervention. And that's when you're going to find a wealth of, podcasts, articles, everything. And it's exactly what you and I are describing, but by a different name. And it gives them whatever little excuse they need to say, we're not cloud seeding. No, we're intervening in the climate. It's the same dang thing. Let's just be honest, but they're going to catch you on the words. So that's one of the key words you need to know. Andrew, take it away. I'll start to pull up some documents.
Yeah, so speaking of definitions and things, and what you said was definitely in line with what my kind of opening remarks were, is that, we're just going off the documents here. I really am not an expert. I'm not a scientist. I don't know the extent of where this is going. I'm just looking at what the UN says, what the military is saying, and then what the CIA and FBI and alphabet soup agencies in Washington, D.C. are saying. So this is a 2011 report from the IPC, which is the UN's International Panel on climate change, intergovernmental panel actually on climate change. And they did an IPCC expert meeting on geoengineering. This took place in Peru in June of 2011. And they have the document on their website. I was going through it, and you mentioned definitions and you mentioned words. There's something in here where they go through some of the phrases, and I'll kind of read you what their definitions are. Geoengineering, and everything I'm about to say is a quote, refers to a broad set of methods and technologies that aim to deliberately alter the climate system in order to alleviate the impacts of climate change. But not all methods seek to either A, reduce the amount of absorbed solar energy in the climate system, or B, increase net carbon sinks from the atmosphere at a scale sufficiently large to alter the climate. Then they talk about two other points, which they say are SRM and SDR. SRM is solar radiation management. This is the intentional modification of the Earth's shortwave radiation budget with the aim to reduce climate change according to a given metric. They talk about surface temperatures, precipitation, regional impacts, artificial injection of stratospheric aerosols, and cloud brightening are two examples of SRM techniques. That's a quote. They also have this thing called CDR, which is carbon dioxide removal. And they say, quote, methods refer to a set of techniques that aim to remove CO2 directly from the atmosphere by either 1, increasing natural sinks for carbon, or 2, using chemical engineering to remove the CO2 with the intent of reducing the atmospheric CO2 concentration. CDR methods involve the ocean, land, and technical systems, including such methods as iron fertilization, large-scale afforestation, and direct capture of CO2 from the atmosphere using engineered chemical means. And then they say some CDR, and remember CDR is carbon dioxide removal, methods fall under the category of geoengineering. While this may not be the case for others, with this distinction being based upon the magnitude, scale, and impact of certain CDR activities, the boundary between CDR mitigation is not clear, and there could be some overlap between the two current definitions. And then they go into basically 108 pages of various risks, impacts of geoengineering, and what it means. They talk about effectiveness. They talk about feasibility, scalability, sustainability, environmental risks, cost and affordability, detection and attribution, governmental challenges, ethical issues, social acceptability, and uncertainty. To the above criteria. These are the bullet points from the IPCC document in 2011 for Peru. So all that to say, over a decade ago, you have the UN meeting talking about geoengineering, talking about altering the climate, talking about injecting aerosols into the atmosphere to reflect sunlight back into space to reduce cooling. All of these things combined open the can of worms to allow us to say that we have a situation on our hands where the deep state is definitely talking about altering the weather. Now, there's another document that came out in 1996. This was a research project. It's called Weather as a Force Multiplier, Owning the Weather in 2025. This was presented in 1996 to the United States Air Force. And within this document, they talk about manipulating the weather. They mainly focus on thunder and lightning and tornadoes. They do allude to larger storms, larger cataclysmic events that they could potentially manipulate, but they talk about the ethical risks therein. So you have just from what I read and what I shared, the Air Force over 2 decades ago talking about what's going on with the weather, making plans, talking about research to use the weather for military means. Then you also have the United Nations and the IPCC, which is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, talking about controlling the weather. And there's a few clips I want to have you play here, Ryan. The first one is Obama's CIA director, John Brennan. If anyone here is a political junkie, they will remember John Brennan and shiver. But John Brennan here talks about geoengineering. He talks about cloud seeding. He talks about climate change very confidently, as though this is just something everybody within the government knows about and recognizes. So we can play that clip.
All right, here we go.
Another example is the array of technologies often referred to collectively as geoengineering, that potentially could help reverse the warming effects of global climate change. One that has gained my personal attention is stratospheric aerosol injection, or SAI, a method of seeding the stratosphere with particles that can help reflect the sun's heat in much the same way that volcanic eruptions do. An SAI program could limit global temperature increases, reducing some risks associated with higher temperatures and providing the world economy additional time to transition from fossil fuels. This process is also relatively inexpensive. The National Research Council estimates that a fully deployed SAI program would cost about $10 billion yearly. As promising as it may be, moving forward on SAI would also raise a number of challenges for our government and for the international community. On the technical side, greenhouse gas emission reductions would still have to accompany SAI to address other climate change effects, such as ocean acidification, because SAI alone would not remove greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. On the geopolitical side, the technology's potential to alter weather patterns and benefit certain regions of the world at the expense of other regions could trigger sharp opposition by some nations. Others might seize on SAI's benefits and back away from their commitment to carbon dioxide reductions. And as with other breakthrough technologies, global norms and standards are lacking to guide the deployment and implementation of SAI and other.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Very.
So SAI, just to kind of
there's tons of keywords
really
right there, like that people say online are crazy. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. So SAI, I just wanted to clarify what that is because I know it's a lot of technical gobbledygook. I'm reading from NOAA, climate.gov, their official website. SAI just stands for an SRM. It's solar radiation modification. So it's deliberate large-scale actions intended to decrease global average surface temperatures by increasing the reflection of sunlight away from the earth, and that is aerosol, small particles released into the atmosphere. So I just wanted to clarify that. And then he was, of course, giving the speech at the Council on Foreign Relations, which is the deep state think tank headquarters in the United States. But go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, that's, I mean, this is, you look at it, and I was about to say, when it comes to this, when the climate intervention folks jump in and start to talk about what's going on, I immediately see two key things. Number one, let me say this way. The climate intervention folks, i.e. the geoengineering folks, will tend to do one primary thing. They'll say, here's the deal. We need to have more sustainable energy. We need to be reducing our carbon footprint. But the problem is there's already a lot of carbon in the atmosphere. So what do we do about that? Well, we need to cool the planet down. We're back to global warming, by the way, folks. This all ends up back to global warming, which they say it's not that, it's climate change. Well, they want to cool the planet down, and it usually comes out one of two ways. And there's either literally stretching out giant shields, sun shields that will reflect, sunlight and warmth back to help the planet cool, or cloud seeding, or essentially injecting sulfates into the atmosphere to try to create these shades of certain kinds of clouds that reflect more sunlight back, and therefore will reduce temperature here on the Earth by some small amount over the next however many years. They're literally, again, engineering geological and Earth-based phenomenon, but it's all for the purpose of trying to cool the Earth down. Literally blocking out the sunlight, which I think the farther we go into science, the more we realize the sun literally is a necessary component of human flourishing and healing, and yet we're trying to block it out. This is wild. But really, when you get down into it, this is actually an overarching goal of what these folks are doing, and why a lot of this is being put together.
Yep, absolutely. And then another clip that I think is worth playing. This is from ABC, if we have that one. This is ABC talking about, and this is where they get into the lasers and everything. But hey, it's ABC. If you want to talk about fake news and you want to talk about misinformation, this was aired on one of the biggest media industrial complex outlets, CBS. So we can play this and listen to climate change and lasers and everything. So if you want to roll that one, Ryan.
Let's do it. Oh, hold on. It doesn't want to work. Oh, I know why. Here we go. I figured it out.
You know, they were talking about climate change yesterday, and now we're learning that scientists and researchers are looking at how to change the weather on purpose. That's right. Lasers now could one day manipulate rain and lightning. CBS This Morning contributor Michio Kaku is a physics professor at City College of New York. Professor, nice to see you. Extraordinary seeing Al Gore and Bill Clinton there together with Charlie, wasn't it?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, they did not get into this discussion, though. But it is fascinating. I mean, lasers, really? To change the weather?
That's right. Well, as Mark Twain once famously said, everyone complains about the weather, but no one ever does anything about it. Well, instead of doing a rain dance, we physicists are firing trillion-watt lasers into the sky to actually precipitate rain clouds and actually bring down lightning bolts. This is potentially a game changer.
But this is experimental.
It's experimental. However, in the laboratory so far it works. When you have water vapor and you have dust particles or ice crystals, you can precipitate rain. It condenses around the seeds. These seeds can also be created by laser beams. By firing trillion-watt lasers, you rip apart the electrons, creating what are called ions, and these ions act like seeds, like dust particles, bringing down rain and even lightning.
Go ahead.
Well, this fascinates me in part because, too, I remember reading the stories that China had used this during the Olympics, that the USSR had used this after Chernobyl to create rain clouds. I mean, did those really work then? We have some of these capabilities now?
Inconclusive. Even in the 60s, the CIA used this to bring down monsoons during the Vietnam War, to wash out the Viet Cong. Governments have been playing with this thing.
Alleged to.
Alleged to, right.
Yeah.
Now, we realize that for decades now, these governments have been alleged to have experimented with weather control, but nothing conclusive. This time we're bringing in the laws of physics rather than simply waving our hands and uttering mumbo jumbo. We're actually using trillion-watt lasers now. And in the laboratory, sure enough, they precipitate rain out of water vapor. Sure enough, you can actually bring down electricity down the beam.
So what does it mean for drought areas that need to have rain for crops? And if they don't have them, there's the consequences of famine.
Well, the bad news is if it's a clear blue sky, it's not going to do anything at all because it only takes water vapor that's already in the air and condenses it. However, for floods, for agriculture, farmers, for people planning wedding parties, football games, you name it, outdoor events and agriculture and flooding and even hurricanes, all of them could be subject to weather modification.
Incredibly interesting, Professor Michio Kaku. Thank you so much.
Well, there you have it, folks. Freaking laser beams. It's true. Literally shooting. And I love, by the way, one of the most telling things to me, one of the people involved in this, who says, oh yeah, this was used to manipulate the weather for this reason, you know, trying to stimulate us out of droughts and trying to do this. And the military used it to try to bring down monsoons because it's a purely American thing to say, oh, this is cool technology. How can we make this a weapon? I mean, it's like the first thing we do with stuff, including sticks as children. What can we make into a weapon? It's,
right.
You know, it's part of who we are. But I love that they say, you know, oh, well, allegedly. And then he has this look of, oh, allegedly. Yes, right. Allegedly. And then you can tell it's like Mr. Science Man, who knows a lot more than the news people, says, yes, I'll say the word allegedly, since that's what we still have to say out here, even though we all know it's true. Like, this is just, it's common knowledge. So you see stuff like this and go, yeah, okay, they've known this for a long time. They've been doing this, the 1960s. They've been doing this for a half a century.
That's right.
And, you know, it's not all like, what can we do that's evil with this? It's often a lot of well-meaning people, and then it's just a really stupid idea.
Yeah, and you know, he talked about the whole alleged thing. Well, you know, I'm on this, and you can put this out in your notes too, Ryan. History.state.gov. This is a .gov website. So for those who don't know, .gov, this is a government-run website. This is Washington, January 13th, 1967. Project Popeye, weather modification in North Vietnam and Laos. Proposal, quote, the Department of Defense has requested our approval to initiate the operational phase of Project Popeye in selected areas along the infiltration routes in North Vietnam and southern Laos. The objective of the program is to produce sufficient rainfall along these lines of communication to mess with and interfere with truck traffic between North and South Vietnam. Recently improved cloud seeding techniques would be applied on a sustained basis in a non-publicized effort to induce continued rainfall through the months of the normal dry season. This is from our United States government, Operation or Project Popeye, 1967. Like, we're not conspiracy theorying here. We're literally reading UN documents, military documents, and DOD documents. So not drawing any conclusions. Like I said at the beginning, we're not saying that, Hurricane Milton, for example, is geoengineered. It could be, or it could not be. I'm not commenting on that. But this is a perfect opportunity with all these hurricanes to say, you know what, this is peculiar. And our government would not withhold any opportunity to advance their goals, whether it be climate change, whether it be the expansion of the federal government for crisis response, whatever it is, it doesn't really matter. The ultimate goal is they want to expand the power and scope of government. And to do that, you have to have some sort of a crisis. You have to have some sort of an issue. You have to have some sort of a rallying cry where people feel fearful or desperate or in need of help, what have you. Mm-hmm. And if it can be the weather, if it can be whatever, that's fine. My personal theory is that it's going to be a lot of things in what they call a polycrisis. And my boss, Alex Newman, has done a lot of reporting on this, and I think he's correct. That's not just going to be a virus, or it's not just going to be the weather, or it's not just going to be this collapse of the economy, or it's not just going to be a war. It's going to be a combination of things in a polycrisis type situation. Because my guess is the American people, even in their frail state, could handle a war or handle a weather emergency, or maybe even handle a short economic crisis. But right. You throw 5 things at them at once, well, guess what becomes the solution? The United Nations, the World Economic Forum, the expansion of the federal government. It's, just like in crises past, you look at things like 9/11, or you look at things like COVID, whatever your opinions are on those topics is irrelevant. The government expanded, the government responded, the government took actions that were unconstitutional, unprecedented in reaction to those events, whether it be the Patriot Act, whether it be what happened with the vaccines, whether it be what happened with NIH, CDC, anything, you pick it. The expansion of the federal government. This even goes back to the Civil War, right? We saw an expansion of the federal government during the Civil War. So this is just typical government responses to issues. And the reason that we're having this podcast today and talking about this isn't because this is some pet issue. At least it's not for me, but it's just another example to be able to sound the alarm, to say, look, our government is wicked. They don't have our best interest at heart. They aren't the solution. They're always the problem. And when we look at things like this, we don't need to go to the furthest extreme and discredit ourselves. We also don't need to be apathetic and say, oh, no, that's impossible. But we need to go back to the principle that government's not the solution. Government's the problem. Government does not have our best interest at heart. They take any crisis and utilize it as an opportunity to expand their authority. And it would not surprise me, as we've said, per all these documents, per all these videos, that a part of that tactic, a part of the arrow in the quiver is weather manipulation. So do your own research, look at these things. Ryan will send all these things out, I'm sure, and you can read and come to your own conclusions. But like I said at the beginning, when they publish things about it, when you have the Air Force, when you have the UN, when you have the CIA, when you have even the mainstream media covering and reporting and talking about these things, you have to believe it. That's the first thing. You have to believe that it's actually possible. But then you also have to recognize they're probably multiple steps ahead of what they're revealing. And that's why we're just having this conversation. So, that's really where I'm at on it right now.
No, and that's, I'm gonna throw my last 2 cents into this, because I got a couple of Rumble comments I want to make sure we reply to. But I look at this and say, just like you said, this is not conspiracy land. Scientists admit it's backed by science. They do try to manipulate the weather. The reasons have varied. Some of them are public, many of them aren't. And to your point, it is going to be used, as all things are, by big and growing government to accumulate power to themselves, and also as one more thing that can be lied about when it comes to how they discuss things with us, we, the American people. So you look at it and say, okay, what's the thing? Well, there's a lot of places to research. We're going to include several of them. We got some of these government documents we're going to send out in the notes. Please make sure you're subscribed, because you want to get those tomorrow. But then also, I'm going to send you down the rabbit hole of a couple of other places that are talking about this, including people we disagree with. I found a great episode, a Zoom interview that RFK Jr., as a presidential candidate in the last 18 months, did with the people who run geoengineeringwatch.org. and the Geoengineering Watch and RFK. I mean, you look at it, these are folks that believe, a lot of them, and even RFK Jr. will say, hey, this meddling with the climate, trying to find a solution. What you're doing is creating something as much, if not more dangerous than the climate change itself. This is someone who I disagree with on the fundamental issue of climate change. And yet he recognizes clear-eyed that government manipulation is quite literally just as bad, if not worse, because they're lying to us. The climate's not lying to us, but government officials are. My favorite quote from him, and this is an interview that I'm going to send out, you'll watch on your own time. They aggravate the problem, then sell us the solution. And the solution is that they want more social controls. That's what I think, I see a Rumble comment over here from PN517. Maybe the hurricanes could be considered an October surprise. You know what? It would not at all surprise me to know that they don't know how to control hurricanes or anything like that, but they do know how to inject things and watch it and maybe try to supercharge stuff that they see to whip it up to a higher level of concern to more powerful storms, not knowing exactly where it'll go, but picking one, maybe knowing that it'll disrupt people. But I don't see how that's actually an electoral victory for them this year, because all it does is expose how bad FEMA is at their job. And it just highlights how, good, you get into Ron DeSantis land, how good it is when other people who are actually taking in charge. I mean, Andrew, you're in Florida. You guys have not had, you're in the panhandle, so you haven't been bashed by these nasty storms over and over. But I think that the storm response is just highlighting how bad the federal government is at this. So I'm not sure there's much of an October surprise in the favor of Kamala Harris, even if this is something that they're engineering to try to supercharge a few storms. You think I'm missing anything on that thought?
No, I don't. And I definitely, like you said, it wouldn't surprise me if it was an October surprise or whatever. Not out of the realm of possibility. But again, I'm not convinced that there's like a joystick and they're steering it, but I am convinced that there's, a possibility of manipulation. It's all to be determined. However, I think that this isn't the first thing we're going to see. There's going to be many October surprises. It's not just one.
Well, and what we certainly know, even if they didn't cause the October surprise, they're going to manipulate it for their advantage. Like now, you got a bunch of people who aren't able to vote. Well, it's really convenient that there's some red areas. So we're not going to overly kill ourselves to try to make sure that the voting works for these folks. I mean, you'll see something like that. Was it a plan or was it a byproduct that they're taking advantage of? I don't know about the first part, but we certainly know the second part is true, which is why you got to find the people who are fighting against that, overcoming it, private organizations, and do that. As far as where that goes, the whole point of this conversation, I think, is, Andrew, you said it just a minute ago, there's so much truth here to talk about and so many receipts and pieces of evidence. We have to make sure that we're bringing this topic up with people and bringing great credibility to this conversation, because there is credibility behind it. However, you also don't, and some people say, we'll invoke it. Marjorie Taylor Greene, the news would love to go into, Marjorie Taylor Greene thinks there's, Jewish space lasers controlling the weather. No. On CBS 9 years ago, you talked about shooting lasers into the atmosphere. This has nothing to do with a crazy lady in Congress or Jews or this or that or the other. This has everything to do with the truth. And here's the actual honest to God truth that was talked about. This is, for us to be armed and ready with that information, I think is a very important part of this, because more attention than ever is being drawn to it. And I think it's finally happening that people are paying attention, because more than ever, they are skeptical of literally everything they're being told, and rightly so. They should be. But seizing that skepticism and grabbing it with credibility, I think, is that's a big thing that needs to be done on our end. And here we just played a few things. You want to talk about dispel the myth and bring up the truth? Here you go. So there's that. Well, speaking of dispelling myths and bringing up the truth, you want to talk a little bit about 60 Minutes. They have managed to shove, I didn't even know how many feet that they had, but all of them are in their mouth now from 2020 to now. It's amazing. 60 Minutes has done more damage to media credibility than the entirety of fake news, I feel like, in the entire era of Trump. What's your thought on that? And then we got a couple clips we might get into here.
Yeah, it was brutal. You had CBS. They did an interview with Kamala, and they did one with Timmy Walls, and they really gave him the goose. And I don't think that was necessarily genuine reporting, that they were like, they had this come to Jesus moment, and they're like, hey, we're going to be true journalists now. I think they recognize that, this whole lapdog versus watchdog media mentality is really catching up to them, and they need to do a little bit of hardball reporting on Kamala and Tim just so they don't look like absolute clowns. This is probably what that was, more than an actual genuine awakening from CBS. Like, oh, wait, we have been, grifting for Democrats all this time. You know what? We really should start asking some hard questions. I don't know if that's what this was, but the result of it was the exact same. I mean, it was just this beautiful, beautiful array of the CBS broadcaster asking the Walz campaign, you've changed your position, Kamala, on so many things. Why have you changed your position? People can't trust you. And then my favorite with Tim Walz, you said you were in China. You've said this, you've equated all of these various factual errors to being a knucklehead. What's your response? And he's just basically like, I'm a knucklehead. It's brilliant because they don't expect that sort of, questioning when they go to CBS. And I doubt that they were expecting it this time around. So the reactions were priceless.
Right.
But my personal opinion is this isn't like some awakening or some red pilling of CBS. I think they just feel like they have to do this because, the media appearance of Kamala and Tim Walz has been unprecedented. I would say, I can't prove this, I don't have the statistics, but it feels this way, that Biden in 2020 did more media than Kamala's doing in 2024. And Biden was the basement campaign guy. At least he was hopping on like Zoom calls and stuff and doing things. It was a little bit more than what Kamala seems to be doing. So this probably came as a big shock to them when they got those questions from 60 Minutes.
Oh, no, I think so. But I mean, the biggest story out of all of this, it's not that they were caught on their heels, which, I will give a little bit of, credit where it's due. 60 Minutes didn't just slobber all over everyone. They actually, what about this? But the real question is this. They asked a couple of times, but the thing is, it's not enough. It's not enough. And obviously their motives aren't pure because 60 Minutes got their hand caught in a cookie jar this week by editing Kamala Harris's answers. In fact, if you haven't seen this video, I'm about to pull it up for you. Here we go. Kamala 60 Minutes. She gave what you would expect, a typical word salad answer to more than one question. And as they played previews about this on Face the Nation, CBS Mornings, the preview videos didn't line up with the actual prime time broadcast. In fact, so much so to the point that this really got them into a world of hurt. Here we've got a little put together of the same question, and listen and watch the guy. And Andrew, I didn't actually, let me send this to you. So you've got it as well, because I know you'll want to be able to hear this. We cut the echo off, folks, but as a result, Andrew's audio got completely cut off. So here you go. This is the video we're about to play, Andrew, so you can watch along. But you listen to this. This is the exact same question. The first video that you'll hear, the first part of it, this was a preview that was played on Face the Nation. And it was the same thing. CBS Mornings, the Sunday and the Monday shows played the same clip that you're about to hear. And then immediately you'll see the same clip play over. But this is from the actual CBS broadcast of 60 Minutes primetime Monday night. Her answer is different, completely different. Let's take a listen to this.
But it seems that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not listening.
Well, Bill, the work that we have done has resulted in a number of movements in that region by Israel that were very much prompted by or a result of many things, including our advocacy for what needs to happen in the region.
But it seems that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not listening.
We are not going to stop pursuing what is necessary for the United States to be clear about where we stand on the need for this war to end.
That's not even part of the word salad paragraph that she gave. It's like they literally clipped a whole different answer from a different part of the interview, and then in the primetime version, they inserted it to make her sound not nearly as stupid as the original answer was. And it's not just the internet, conservatives on the internet doing fancy editing. You go back and look, and it's probably been pulled at this point, but many of us went and did screen records and pulled the receipts. CBS's own media sources. You pull it from Media Eyes, straight from broadcast, the recordings, or you go and pull it from their YouTube channel. It's different. They have edited her interview to make her sound better, and they got caught. Trump is demanding the transcripts. Now, lots of people are demanding the entire transcript and unedited video. because it looks like they did some dirty work trying to make Kamala Harris at least a little bit more, well, not as painful to listen to. We should say it that way. You got any thoughts on this, Andrew?
Yeah, it's basic, typical fake news, right? Running interference for the team that you're rooting for, throwing in a couple controlled opposition style questions, which are the ones that I was talking about earlier. But ultimately, they're still rooting for Kamala. And, Ryan, I also saw today that The Atlantic came out and endorsed Kamala Harris. I mean, these news, air quotes news outlets are no longer, holding their opinions, at least behind the guise of slanted headlines and twisted stories. They're now actually coming out and legitimately making endorsement posts saying that we endorse. Now, you look at news outlets like the Liberty Sentinel, or you look at the New American and things like that. It's obvious what we believe and what our opinions are, right? We're for the Constitution. We're for people who, uphold the Constitution, but you'll never see a carte blanche endorsement with the letterhead of the media organization. You'll never see Liberty Sentinel Media put out a thing saying we officially as an entity endorse Donald J. Trump, because that's not what you're supposed to do, right? You're supposed to report the news, and you're going to come at that with some sort of a worldview and some sort of a bias. But now you have entities who are actually going and endorsing candidates, and then they're manipulating the content. And I just would like to know the countless examples of times where we didn't catch it. This is one where we were able to catch it. But think of moments in American media history, even when you just had a few channels on TV, where these interviews, these discussions, these speeches shaped American public opinion. Who was controlling that? Who was editing that? I think that there's a lot of instances where we probably were sold a bill of goods and we had no idea about it. But that's the benefit of modern technologies, that now we can kind of see through it. So absolutely unbelievable. And kudos for Donald Trump for asking for the transcript. I doubt he'll get it. But This comes, of course, on the heel of Kamala accepting a debate with CNN, Donald Trump rejecting that debate with CNN. And I thought his post on Truth was absolutely perfect. He said, I defeated Joe Biden, I defeated Kamala Harris, and a prize fighter never asks for a rematch after winning. And he said, besides, Kamala recently said, and this is true, that she wouldn't have changed anything Joe Biden did. So that is the end of the discussion. If you want to know what Kamala is going to be like, just look at the past 3.5 years. And I think he was completely justified for rejecting that debate.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And I mean, when it comes to this, modern technology helps us, but I'd also say there's a pretty substantial element now of, I don't know if it's arrogance or desperation, but at this point, it seems in 2024, fake news media, that the propaganda wing of the deep state doesn't really give a rip about even trying to cover their tracks that smoothly. So again, are they hurried because all the polling really does indicate that she's just getting her tail whipped? Or do they just not care anymore because they think people aren't paying attention? I'd say it's probably a little bit of a mixture of both, because they have gotten sloppier, but they also have become even less and less caring about the whole thing. But the other part of this, which really kind of spoke to me, was the reminder about Trump's beef with 60 Minutes that goes back 4 years ago. And if you think about it, folks, we've got, the reminders on this. This relates to one of the biggest issues of 2020. Yes, there was election fraud and theft. There goes our YouTube stream. Yes, there was a steal that happened in several key counties. And you want to talk about making sure we run up the vote tallies for Joe Biden and suppress votes for Trump. I'm pretty sure all of that happened at this point. It looks like it from all of the evidence. But there was still election interference that took place primarily through the media. And if you think about it, one of the key things about this week is Trump was scheduled to be on 60 Minutes as well. And then he backed out because why? He was demanding an apology from 60 Minutes, and specifically from Leslie Stahl, over the last time he was on 4 years ago. And they said no. So he said, fine, I'm not going to come and do the interview. Well, the last time 4 years ago, you'll recall, we went through this, by the way, it was 45 minutes of an interview he did with 60 Minutes in 2020. This aired in October, I think on the 9th, the 7th, something like that, the very beginning of October. And as soon as he brought up the Hunter Biden laptop, which you remember at this point, Facebook was being told by the FBI, it's the hallmarks of Russian disinformation, 51 former intelligence agency officials. Well, this has all the hallmarks of Russian disinformation. Trump brings up the laptop, and immediately Leslie Stahl, and I've got the video here. There's about a 2-minute video of the exchange. She says, oh, well, we can't talk about that because we can only talk about things that are verified. This is somewhere in the middle of the interview where she interrupted him 73 times and corrected him. interrupting his thought 73 times. And only thanks to the Trump campaign do we even have this, because he had to film all of his interviews with his own cameras and audio because it was so dishonest. They knew that this kind of thing was going to happen to them. I've started to trot that out this week because I think people need to be reminded just how atrocious these people are. Let that anger seep in again in 2024 and turn into more energy, more donation dollars, more taking people to the polls. I hope that everyone hears it and gets fired up. I don't know if you remember or heard it, or if you think we should play that 2 minutes from Trump 2020.
Sure, yeah, go for it.
But I think it's here. I sent it to you. We'll play this real quick because let this sink in and infuriate you all over again, and remind yourself that polls now show, and not our polling, but mainstream polling show, that up to 17% of voters in 2020 said they likely would have changed their minds had they known the entire information about the Hunter Biden laptop that we know now. And close to 80% of all voters said that probably would have had an outcome on the election itself, a change in who won the election in 2020. We only lost by 44,000 votes. Think about that as you just listen to Leslie Stahl full of herself in 2020 and see if, you think Donald Trump's right in deserving an apology.
This is 60 Minutes. And we can't put on things we can't verify.
You won't put it on because it's bad for Biden.
We can't put on things we can't verify.
Leslie.
You know what you told me a long time ago when I asked why you keep saying fake in the media?
Yeah.
You said to me, I say that because I need to discredit you so that when you say negative things about me, no one will believe
I don't have to discredit you.
But that's what you told me.
You've discredited yourself.
You told me that.
Leslie, you've discredited yourself. When you say that you're not going to cover Biden, you're going to ask him what flavor ice cream he has, okay?
That's not
Instead
me.
of why did Hunter get $3.5 million from Moscow? Instead of why is an energy company paying your son $183,000 a month or whatever they're paying him, and he has no experience in energy. You discredit yourself. I don't have to discredit you.
So this story about Hunter and his laptop, some repair shop found it. The source is Steve Bannon and Rudy Giuliani.
I don't know anything about that. I just know it's a laptop, and they haven't.
And you're making this one of the hottest, most important issues in your rallies.
It's a very important issue to find out whether or not a man's corrupt who's running for president, who's accepted money from China and from Ukraine and from Russia.
All these
I think
things
that's
have
an
been
important issue.
investigated and
It's incredible the way you can try and say this and sit there and look me in the eye and say it. He accepted money, his family, from Russia, from Ukraine, from China, and from other places. His brother, who didn't have experience, became a big builder in Iraq without experience. Take a look at what's going on, Leslie. And then you say that shouldn't be discussed.
I'm saying
it's the biggest scandal out there, Leslie, and you don't cover it.
Because it can't be verified.
You want to talk about insignificant things.
I'm telling you.
Of course it can be verified. Excuse me, they found the laptop. Leslie.
Can't be verified.
What can't be verified?
The laptop.
Why do you say
Unbelievable.
There's nothing, and I was just having a conversation here in the office this morning. Right wingers can get on Real America's Voice or any of the great outlets out there that are talking. Jack Posobiec, who I love to listen to, the Human Events Daily Show. I can run with all of these, and if you try to get people whipped up and excited, that usually doesn't do it for me. But watching what actually happened, watching the disingenuous lies just drip out of these people's mouths and the self-righteousness with which they treat people who are telling the truth, that's the kind of thing that gets me yelling at a TV and wanting to throw something, because it is so infuriating. And I mean, that's the kind of feeling I think most Americans need to have and be reminded of these kinds of videos, because you see it and just say, these people not only are that corrupt, they're flaunting it in your face. They don't even care. They don't care about you. They don't care that they're going to do it anyway. It really is just the most insulting thing. I mean, you want to talk about fomenting revolution against you. They're doing a very good job. But the problem is, I think people are just so lazy and apathetic. I'm not sure how many it gets. Yeah. Leslie Stahl should have been fired a long time ago. Someone says on Rumble. They're absolutely right. This is anyway, 60 Minutes, yes, they edited Kamala Harris, but Trump didn't come, and I think it's a bigger story why. 60 Minutes directly contributed to the election interference that overturned the 2020 election results, in my opinion. Period.
Yep, I agree with you. I don't have anything to add. I agree.
Okay. All right. I'll say this stuff. No, I'm kidding. Let me see here. Let's take a real quick look over here. Someone talking about deep dive on Kamala's husband. I don't really have a whole lot to say on that, but it looks like the side piece is married to a woman beater. I mean, that's the best I can figure out. And that one again seems to be credibly placed enough with enough news and evidence. I don't really care to go any deeper than that, but it passes the smell test. Let's just say that. Although I will say that figures that this guy who impregnated his nanny and slapped his girlfriend is the left's new picture of, oh, this is how we combat toxic masculinity. No, right. That is toxic masculinity. It does exist. It's not us. It's you. And it's that's the picture of it right there. Doug Emhoff is the toxic version. And it's not masculinity, by the way, but he is a toxic individual. That's what it looks like. Yep. Oh, let's see. T-Rex Inc. has appeared in the chat. Our sponsor, reminding that more surprises are possible. Find out how to vote early in your area. Bank it. Take someone else, then another, then another. You're darn right, that's what you need to do. Even in the States, you need to make sure that maybe you need to vote early because you need to use your election day to drive people to the polls who are too lazy to not go and do it themselves. But that's what it's going to take. That's absolutely what it's going to take this year. And I think looking at the polls that I'm looking at and seeing the leaked internal polls, I think that's where we're headed. It looks pretty good. Oh, Andrew, Trump wins or not?
Oh, Trump wins. Yeah, Trump wins. It's just a matter of what happens, as we've said on this show, what happens after the election. So
give me the electoral number. What number? Trump wins with how many electoral college votes?
296. I say 296.
I say 312, maybe 306. 312? That's my because what Nevada is 6, right? That's
going. I think he wins Pennsylvania. I think he wins Wisconsin. I think he wins Arizona, Minnesota. I think that there's a good chance. I hope he wins Minnesota, but that one I'm a little less sure of. Yeah. There's he's making some plays for some other ones. Like New York and Virginia, and you never know. I wouldn't never say never, but it seems somewhat unlikely. But it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, I was talking about this yesterday. I had a crazy light bulb moment when the alert came through that Donald Trump has scheduled a rally for 9 days before election days at Madison Square Garden in Midtown New York City. Holy cow. No Republican candidate goes there or Palm Springs, which they're in next week. Quite frankly, no one goes to California or New York City, let alone the dead of New York City, at Madison Square Garden. No Republican does that to get votes. Well, guess what? That tells me that they're looking at numbers that are just crazy. Either that or it's a power move. And if so, it's an impressive power move. I'll give them that. But now, folks, we're looking at 7 swing states that if you hear them talk about 7 swing states, you'll hear that thrown around a lot. That's Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, Nevada, and Arizona. I'm pretty sure at this point, whoever wins Pennsylvania wins the election. That's a big one. Yes. It looks like Trump is on his way to winning Pennsylvania. And frankly, if he does, I think that technically Kamala Harris has a mathematical possible path without Pennsylvania, but the likelihood of it is smaller. Well, it's pretty small. It's minute at best. But at this rate, it looks like Trump's taken Georgia, Carolina, Pennsylvania, probably Michigan, maybe Wisconsin, definitely Arizona, and maybe Nevada. That's a 312 election right there. That's pretty wild. And I think that's landslide territory in the modern age because we're never going to see a 72 or an 84 ever again, I don't believe.
No, I think you're right.
Anyway.
Yeah, it's close. It's going to be close. But yeah, if he wins, the Rust Belt, if he wins Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota, but loses Pennsylvania, he can still pull it out. But, he really needs Arizona and the 3, Minnesota, Wisconsin, or Michigan, or he needs Arizona and Pennsylvania because Minnesota and Wisconsin, you're looking at 10 electoral votes a pop. It's 20 combined. Pennsylvania is 19. So he actually does better if he loses Pennsylvania, but then wins all 3 of the Rust Belt alongside Arizona. So there's multiple ways to look at this, but you have options and there's no desperateness of one state where it's all, I think Pennsylvania is probably the most important to look at. I agree with that 100%, but I don't think you're not looking at one sole path. I think there's multiple paths.
There are, and it's a very interesting one to look at, because I know we were talking quite a bit about the Nebraska the Nebraska winner takes all rules and their one little electoral vote with that second congressional district. But I don't think that that's going to come into play based on what we're looking at. I mean, if Trump takes either Michigan or Wisconsin and all of the Sun Belt, and then he loses Pennsylvania, it's still over 270 for Trump. So it's very interesting to see. But the reality is, all the folks across these working regions, especially Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, they have felt the wrath of Harris-Biden policies for too many years now. The Teamsters, the everything, people just aren't buying it anymore. So there's a lot of very terribly misinformed and ridiculous people out there still voting, but I think there's more and more that are pretty convinced it's got to change. Even if I don't like Bad Orange Man, I don't really care. This has to change. So yeah, the wealthy people, oh, by the way, someone's saying any of the wealthy people who back Kamala Harris will be sorry if she wins and the tax on unrealized gains is enacted. I don't know if they'll be sad. I think all the wealthy people who support Kamala Harris support her because they don't want the Epstein list to come out, and they know that that's coming out if Trump gets back in charge. I think that's why millionaires and billionaires, that's what Elon Musk says. Any millionaires and billionaires support her because they don't want the Epstein list out. Ooh, shots fired. But all right. What else? Did we miss anything? Do we have any closing comments, closing remarks, last things on laser beams and the Jewish weather satellites, or any of the conspiracy things we've covered? What you got? Or does that wrap us up?
Yeah, no, I think that wraps us up. And basically, just look into this for yourself. Ultimately, we are really proud to be able to go and look at these original source documents and have that be the guiding point of our discussion. I don't want to participate in any sort of conversation with anybody where it's just, offhanded, unproven craziness. I want to talk about the documents. I want to talk about the sources. I want to read quotes. I want to, I want titles of people and what they're saying. I want to get into the nitty gritty of these things. And if there isn't anything like that, then it's probably not worth having the discussion. But on all of these different things we discussed, the weather, discussion included, we have all of those things. So I think that it's just this balance of not going to the furthest side over here and saying Jewish space lasers, it's all controlled down to the second and to the inches of rain and to the, mile per hour of the wind. Mm-hmm. You don't want to go over there, but you also don't want to go over to the, oh, that's not going to happen, you're a crazy kook believing, conspiracy theories. I think that the truth on this one's in the middle. And I think that this is possible. There's documents proving it, and it has some sort of effect on our lives. And therefore, we need to know about it. And honestly, we're probably all paying for it as well through our tax dollars. So it's our problem to deal with, our discussion to have. And therefore, I think that people really need to pay attention and start waking up and just let this be another point. It's not like we have a shortage of them, but another point of how the government's not the solution, the government's the problem, and that government will take any opportunity to expand their power, to incite fear, and then to be able to capitalize on that and have a power grab. So this is another opportunity to discuss that and be responsible with the talking points as well, to not discredit the movement and the America First, conservative, pro-Constitution, pro-liberty folks, because that is a hindrance. But also recognize these people on the left, they too have their own things that are outlandish, like you can change your gender, or you can be born a boy but actually be a girl. I mean, there are that is crazier than the discussion we just had, which is completely unfounded. So I think the rhetoric needs to be refined. And when the left and Biden says, oh, Congressman Marjorie Taylor Greene's talking about controlling the weather, how crazy. It's like, yeah, but we have these documents. And by the way, you guys believe that, people can turn into animals, or people can turn into opposite sex. And, you have your crazy things too. And you actually have no documents, no science, no reason to put these things forward other than just pure ideology. So we need to be on the offense, not the defense. Always, always, always on the offense. And, don't post things, don't say things, don't communicate things until you've thought it through, until you've done some research. And I think that is a point all of us, myself included, needs to be constantly reminded of. So that's kind of where I'm at in my final thoughts on this. But do your own research, be responsible, and be questioning and fury of the government.
Yep, you're absolutely right. That is absolutely the end, and we have absolutely nothing else to say today. I couldn't have put a button on it better myself. Don't forget, folks, unauthorizedcaucus.com. That's where you're going to go and find all of the signups for this, and make sure you get all the links and the videos and the documents and the PDFs. I'm not sending you links on the PDFs. These old ones disappear on you. Trust us, we know. You go and get them and download them. That's what I'm going to send you, is the actual PDF documents, so they too will be in your possession. Do it with your videos too. And then, of course, don't forget to go over to trexinc.com, and there you will get your awesome promo. If you get the Caucus 30 discount, Caucus 30, you'll get the big promo code. Go to trexinc.com. Say thank you to them as our sponsor of Unauthorized Caucus. Couldn't do it without them. And that'll do it for us until next Thursday. Thank you, Andrew, for filling in again. And we appreciate your thoughts so much.
Always a pleasure. Thank you, Ryan.
You guys can follow Andrew at Andrew1Muller on Twitter, on X, and then also go and look up the Liberty Sentinel and the New American. You'll find all of his work there at those two wonderful websites. They're on X as well. But until next time, go and sign up at the website. Make sure you get the podcast and notes tomorrow. And folks, I'll see you next Thursday. It'll be noon. It'll be caucus time. We're looking forward to it. Have a good week, everyone.